He vanished on a summer afternoon in 1990, a father stepping out to buy charcoal for the family's backyard barbecue. The grill was lit. The children waited with paper plates in their hands. But he never came back. No goodbye, no trace, just silence, and an untouched cooler left by the back door. 25 years later, the family gathered again in that same backyard. Burgers sizzling, kids running through sprinklers, the air thick with memory, and then, through the gate, he walked in. Older. Thinner, carrying the same brand of charcoal. This is the story of a man who disappeared without explanation, of a family that carried his absence for decades, and of the night when truth finally sat down at the table. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every single one, and I love seeing your interaction. Cincinnati, Ohio. Late afternoon heat wavered over the cul-de-sac. In the Turner backyard, cafe lights sagged from the maple to the fence, a homemade constellation. An old Emerson radio hummed classic rock under the chatter. The grill popped. Ribbons of smoke drifted into the alley. A red-checked tablecloth breathed with the breeze. Michael Turner held a barbecue lighter like a pen, the posture of a man who organizes the present when the past won't. He'd aligned condiments, stacked plates by size, made a half-moon of lawn chairs. Above the cooler, a Polaroid from 1990 hung by a clothespin, his father grinning beside 8-year-old Michael at the county fair, both in Reds caps, both squinting into the same future. Sugar and charcoal sweetened the air. A mower coughed 2 yards over. Emily, his sister, crushed mint into lemonade. Their mother Linda built a careful tower of buns. On the patio, a shoebox half hid under a folded flag runner. Inside, a 1990 All-Star stub, a steel Timex with a cracked crystal, and a child's blue plastic whistle scarred by teeth. Michael hadn't meant to open it. Grief doesn't schedule the past, it trespasses. He thumbed the lighter. Flame crawled into the charcoal. The yard hushed around the work of heat, grass clippings, gasoline, a whisper of coming rain. Each scent arrived and held. From the porch, Linda watched like someone guarding an unseen door. Her ring clicked against glass. "You're overcooking already," she said, smiling like smoke had never meant anything else to this family. Across the fence, retired Detective Frank Malone adjusted a sprinkler so the arc wouldn't splash the guests. He noticed the shoebox. His face did a small thing only old policemen do, an extra breath where a flinch belongs. "Need ice?" he called. "We're good," Michael said, though he wasn't sure what they had and what they didn't. He let the tongs heat on the grate, metal ticking faintly. He looked down the alley, a tight corridor where weeds raised little flags from broken pavement. The alley drew a line to the street, and the street was where the past would walk if it ever decided to show up. The first drops arrived, sonar pings on aluminum trays. Emily laughed, arms outstretched. Mint and lemon breathed up from the pitcher. Michael lowered the lid. The radio slipped into static and back again, a song Linda used to hum. Somewhere beyond the alley, a car door thudded. The maple leaves stirred. The cafe lights swayed. Michael didn't turn. He listened. Shoes on wet concrete, a breath held too long, the measured lift of a gate latch by someone who already knew the yard. "Did you invite more people?" Emily asked. "No," he said, and the word felt like a skipped groove. Linda's hand moved toward the shoebox. Frank narrowed the sprinkler's arc. Grease found flame and climbed like a signal. The gate swung without a creak, as if oiled that morning. A man stood in the frame, tall, leaner than memory, hair wintering at the temples, plain shirt, clean jeans, nothing in his hands but rain. The string light flashed on a dented watch crystal. He looked at the maple, the half-moon of chairs, then at their faces, trained by 25 years to expect nothing and still be startled. "Evening," he said, voice rough like a road after winter. Linda didn't breathe. Emily's cup trembled a thin line of lemonade onto the plastic cloth. Michael felt the lighter, the tongs, the shoebox, the watch, each object he'd arranged restack into a logic that made new sense and no sense at all. Frank took one step and stopped, as if there were rules about how fast you could cross a yard when the past arrived. He named him without asking. James. The name fell into the yard like a coin into an old coat pocket. The man nodded. Raindrops gathered on his lashes. When he looked at Michael, relief softened something Michael had armored for decades. "Dad," Emily said first, half scolding, half prayer. The grill crackled. The maple shrugged off a gust. A motorcycle downshifted somewhere and was gone. Michael set the lighter parallel to the table's edge because his hands needed a task they could finish. He raised the grill lid to make heat sting his eyes. He met the man's gaze the way he met his students, level, measuring, kind, and asked the question history always asks the present. "Where have you been?" The answer didn't come. Not yet. The rain stilled. The song on the radio reached its chorus, and every clock in the yard, ticking or imagined, went quiet as the gate clicked shut behind him. Michael didn't remember walking around the grill. His body did it for him. He offered the man a towel the way you hand a stranger directions, carefully, fingers clear of contact. The man took it, dabbed the rain from his face, then his hands, then the dented watch crystal, as if polishing a window to an earlier house. Michael Turner, 38, carried himself like someone who'd been nominated for adulthood against his will and accepted out of habit. People knew him as Mr. Turner, the history teacher who sat on top of desks during lectures and let silence do half the teaching. He taught the Cold War by asking what fear feels like in the body. He taught Reconstruction by passing around a photo of his great-grandfather's house deed and asking who had been allowed to sign theirs. He lived 6 blocks from the high school in a narrow brick bungalow with creaky floors, a front porch swing, and a spare room he called the archive. On one wall, a corkboard crowded with photocopied articles about disappearances, not because he romanticized them, but because a body learns the shape of its wound and studies it. A map of Cincinnati was pushed with pins, blue for dates, yellow for rumors, red for places you only visit in daylight. His students teased him for loving libraries. He smiled because libraries had been the one place in 1995 where an anxious 15-year-old could look for a missing person without explaining himself at a counter. The first time he searched microfilm, he learned that grief has a mechanical sound, the click and whir of a reel advancing and then snapping back to the beginning. Another year he joined the debate team just to learn to hold a room when his hands wanted to shake. He learned to drive on the slow roads by the river. He learned to fix a carburetor from a neighbor because a car that starts is better than one that promises. He learned, above all, that competence is a kind of armor you can put on in the morning and sleep in at night. In family pictures, Michael is always standing at the edge of the frame, one hand on someone else's shoulder. Emily called him a caretaker. Linda called him a blessing in the tone that says the word and the apology beneath it. He'd never married. He dated a nurse named Alana for a while, and when she asked about his father, he said, "What you say when the truth is an unfinished room." It's complicated. Now the complication stood in the gate, wringing a towel he hadn't earned the right to use. Neighbors, 2, then 5, pretended to rearrange chairs that didn't need rearranging. The rain paused, aware of its cue. "Michael," Linda said softly. A request folded into a name. He realized he was blocking the man's view of the yard like a bouncer in his own life. He stepped aside without moving, the way you do when your mind goes first and your feet catch up late. "I'm James," the man said to the group, because he had to start somewhere. He nodded toward Frank. "Malone?" Frank's jaw ticked. "I know." Michael watched Linda's eyes. They were not surprised the way a stranger is surprised by fireworks, wide, delighted, afraid. They were the kind of surprise you get when a letter finally arrives that you mailed to yourself from another city. He looked down at the shoebox to check the world's arithmetic. The All-Star stub and the whistle were there. The watch was not. He had put that Timex on top, hadn't he? He had wound it, listened to the tired tick, set it at the hour his father was last seen. 6:17 p.m. by the register at Ralston's Hardware, receipt time-stamped and everything. He could see himself doing it the way you can see a childhood bedroom when you close your eyes, and yet the box was missing the weight of its heaviest memory. Linda reached the box first. "Inside," she said, a public word with a private aim. "Please." They filed into the kitchen, the same one Michael had repainted. The winter Linda's shoulder froze up. Lemon oil and dish soap scented the air. Water streaked the window, above the sink, like pencil lines. The Emerson radio, carried in by habit, hissed half a bar of Tom Petty before finding a baseball game. At the table, Michael placed 3 mugs as if this were office hours, and he could grade whatever came next. Emily sat with her knees tucked beneath the chair, eyes bright, voice barely there. "Dad," she tried again, then covered her mouth as if the word were hot. James didn't sit. He stood by the counter with the towel folded at perfect right angles, like a man who'd had to invent new rituals to replace the ones he'd forfeited. He took a breath and let it out in sections. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "That makes 2 of us," Michael replied. It came out kinder than it felt. Frank lingered in the doorway, careful with the threshold, as if it might be evidence. He had known Michael since the boy was tall enough to borrow a step stool to shuck corn. Frank had taught him the names of tools, the order of operations for repairing a leaky shut-off valve, how to stay when staying was hard. He had also once sat in a patrol car with Linda and told her the city had no more leads. 25 years, Emily said. "Were you hurt? Were you taken?" James closed his eyes. "No." Michael rubbed his thumb across a coffee ring on the table. "The way you rub a stain you can't admit is permanent." "Then why?" James's jaw worked. He touched the dent in the watch crystal with a tenderness that didn't look rehearsed. "Because sometimes the safest place for the people you love is a place where they think you're gone." Silence. Then the refrigerator's motor thudded on like a second heart. Michael felt something familiar and infuriating rise, other people's mysteries crowding out his right to answers. "You don't get to start with riddles." James nodded, like he'd expected that much and deserved worse. He finally sat. "I was working nights at the riverfront warehouse. There were misunderstandings, money moving that wasn't listed, a truck that shouldn't have crossed the bridge. I saw something I shouldn't have seen, and someone saw me seeing it." Frank's eyes didn't move. "Names?" "Not yet," James said. He glanced at Linda, and in that glance lived a house full of old arguments, 2 packed suitcases. A door closed softly at midnight. "I left to keep you clear of it." Emily shook her head. "You left us with it." Michael's hand found the box again. He lifted the lid, half expecting the watch to be inside after all, as if observation could create presence. Stub, whistle, no watch. He looked up at Linda, whose ring clicked once against her mug. "Mom," he said gently, "where's the Timex?" The question landed between them like the missing weight. Linda held it for a breath she couldn't spare. "I mailed it," she said. "Years ago?" "To who?" Michael asked. Linda looked past her son and straight at Frank. "To the last return address James sent me." The room tilted, not a crash, just the gentle shift of a deck when a boat passes close. Michael recognized the new geometry. He didn't stand. He didn't shout. He catalogued. He had been the historian of a story that had footnotes his mother kept in a different drawer. James folded the towel again, even thinner, and stared into his hands, as if truth could be pressed flat like laundry. "You wanted answers," he said, voice low. "I'll give you what I can give. But if we start, we have to finish tonight." He looked to Frank, then back to Michael. "And we start with Malone." The kitchen clock ticked toward an hour that felt earlier and later than it was. Michael stood, walked to the sink, then back again. Like pacing could make the room disclose its secrets. James sat with the folded towel, his eyes restless, but never straying far from the shoebox. The missing Timex had become a new absence, one that didn't belong to 1990, but to the present moment. "Malone," James repeated, his tone flat but heavy. "You never stopped, did you?" Frank didn't answer. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, water darkening the shoulders of his shirt. His silence wasn't empty. It was a ledger, with numbers he wasn't willing to read aloud. Linda moved to the stove, though there was nothing cooking. She adjusted the burner knobs like alignment could fix what decades had misaligned. Michael broke the quiet. "Strange how the watch is gone the same night you return." James looked at him, eyes steady, voice low. "That watch doesn't disappear on its own." The whistle in the shoebox gleamed a childish blue under the kitchen light. Emily reached for it, her hand hovering before she pulled back. "It was yours," she said. "You used to blow it in the yard until Mom made you stop. You said Dad hated the sound." Michael nodded, remembering the tinny screech and the way James had pinched it from his lips once, laughing, pretending to confiscate it like a referee. The whistle was harmless, and yet it had survived where the watch had not. He slid it across the table, the plastic squealing faintly against the wood. "Evidence," Michael said, though of what he couldn't explain. Frank finally spoke. "Objects tell you patterns. They also lie. Depends on who handles them." Emily frowned. "You think someone planted or took the watch?" Frank didn't reply. Instead, he asked James, "Where were you between July and November of '91? The question landed like a gavel. James shifted, rubbed the towel again. "Not here." Michael saw it then, the small cut on his father's knuckle, half-healed, angry at the edges. It wasn't the wound of a man who'd just walked out of the rain. It was older, shaped by something sharp. He thought of the alley, the car door, the gate swinging like it had been oiled. "Where have you been staying?" Michael pressed. James hesitated too long. "Motels, South Side? Which one?" "Doesn't matter." But it did matter. Cincinnati had half a dozen Southside motels, most long used as staging grounds for things better left unrecorded. Michael felt his ribs tighten, as though the scar in his family was becoming a fresh wound on his own body. Emily's voice rose. "We deserve more than half answers." James exhaled, his gaze dropping to the whistle again. "There are people who still watch this family, people who don't forgive debts. They're patient. They'll wait decades." Linda gripped the counter. "Then why here? Why now?" James didn't answer. The refrigerator hummed again, too loud for its size. Outside, the rain slowed to drizzle, but the air inside grew heavier, as if the storm had chosen the kitchen instead of the sky. Michael pushed his chair back, the scrape sharp. "If someone's watching, prove it." For the first time, James looked afraid. His eyes shifted toward the curtained window over the sink. The thin fabric twitched, though no one touched it. A shape, fast, slight, gone, moved past the glass. Emily gasped. Frank straightened. Michael reached for the window and yanked the curtain aside. The backyard was empty except for the maple-dripping rain. But the gate latch, the one James had opened minutes ago, now dangled broken. They spilled onto the porch. The cafe lights blinked in damp arcs. Michael stepped onto the grass, the scent of cut blades risen by the rain, the small shock of cold at his ankles. He crouched to the latch. The metal wasn't just bent, it had been pried. Tool marks laddered the curve. A smear of black, grease or tar, darkened the hinge. "Don't touch," Frank said. But he was already fishing a handkerchief from his pocket, the habit of evidence outlasting retirement. He dabbed the smear. The cloth took a faint stripe like mascara. "Fresh." Emily shivered. "Someone stood there watching us." "How long?" "As long as they needed," Frank said. Michael scanned the fence line. The maple dripped onto a patch of mud near the gate, and in that mud a partial shoe impression had held. Chevron tread, men's size, the heel nipped at the edge of the print, like the wearer dragged his foot when he pivoted. He had learned to read impressions from Frank one summer while helping the old man look for a neighbor's lost dog. Memories arrived with their own authority now. He turned here, Michael murmured. Fast. James watched the alley as if it were a scripture that had once saved him and then condemned him. They test the edges. They break small things first. Like a family, Linda said, without looking at anyone. From the alley, a trash can lid rattled, then settled. The sound was common enough to dismiss, except no wind pushed at anything, and raccoons usually make a mess, not a single sharp metallic note. Michael's eyes found the telephone pole. A wet rectangle had peeled away from it, leaving a lighter outline. He walked closer. The rectangle lay face down in the mud. A motel parking stub, pink paper turned the color of liver by the rain. He lifted it with the handkerchief. On the back, under smeared ink, survived a stamped line. Riverfront Inn, room 214, paid cash. 2 nights. James flinched, small but visible. Yours? Frank asked. No. Emily looked from the stub to her father the way a jury looks at a defendant who forgot where to put his hands. Then why do you look like you recognize it? James didn't answer. His eyes did the answering, toward the stub, then toward the shoebox visible through the kitchen window like an altar left unattended. A car engine coughed at the far end of the alley, then cut off. The cough had the shape of a particular problem Michael knew from his own high school Buick, a sticky choke that flooded the engine if you pumped the pedal twice. Someone sat there, key halfway, waiting. Michael's skin prickled. "We go inside," he said. "Slow," Frank agreed. "Curtains first. Lights on." They retreated like people leaving a graveside, walking forward while looking back. In the kitchen, Emily yanked the curtain closed with hands that shook enough to set the rod chiming. The room smelled like rain off denim and lemon oil, the ordinary sense of a safe life newly misapplied. Linda set 4 bowls on the counter as if dinner could force the day back onto rails. No one touched them. Michael placed the motel stub beside the shoebox. The whistle, its blue plastic dulled by years, cast a small oval shadow. He could almost see his childhood thumbprint in the teeth marks. He could almost hear the breath he used to spend trying to bring someone home. Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced down. "No service," he said. "Storms hit the tower before. It'll clear." He didn't sound like he believed it. James's gaze settled on the radio. "Leave that on." "Why?" Emily asked. "Because if they want to speak without stepping onto the lawn," James said, "they'll pick a voice we're already inviting into the room." Michael turned the Emerson's dial until the green eye steadied on a station carrying the baseball game again. The announcer's voice threaded calm through the static. He narrated a double in left field and the slow shuffle of relief pitchers. Beside the radio, the motel stub bled pink into the handkerchief, a small tide spreading along the cloth weave. The shoebox waited. So did the whistle. "What did you see at that warehouse?" Michael asked, refusing to fill in the silence for James. "Trucks that should have been empty weren't," James said. Manifests that said flooring and paper goods felt too light. Then a Saturday, a shipment that bypassed the dock, parked across the river for exactly 9 minutes, and came back lighter. You don't forget the way a truck looks when it's hiding what it has. Frank's stare didn't blink. "You went to internal, or you didn't?" "I tried," James said. "A man with a city badge told me to go home and be smart." The next morning, Linda found a note under the wiper. "Good husbands don't make widows." He spoke without drama, the way you recite a lab result you've already outlived. Emily's jaw clenched. "You left because of a note." "I left because of what came with it," James said. "A photograph of Michael walking out of school. A photograph of Emily on the church playground. They were taken from inside a car I didn't recognize." Michael inhaled and tasted copper. The whistle's mouthpiece dug into his palm. He hadn't realized he'd picked it up. He set it down, shame flushing his face at the childishness of holding it like armor. Frank lifted the motel stub again, reading past the rain scars. Room 214, 2 nights, Riverfront Inn. That place still takes cash. He set it down, voice low. If they were here tonight, they'll have a fallback. Which is? Michael asked. Leaving a message you can't ignore, Frank said. The kitchen light flickered once, just a blink, like a house shrugging off fatigue. Frank looked up. Basement panel? New last year, Michael said. I replaced the breakers. Then it's not you, Frank muttered. Linda stepped toward the sink to steady herself, then stopped. In the shallow puddle where the curtain's edge had dripped onto the counter, letters bled through, the imprint of a stamp someone had pressed against wet fabric without meaning to. Emily leaned in. The stamp's circle carried a simple logo, a triangle, nested within a larger triangle. Around it, a line of capitals. Queen City Storage. Access verified. Michael met Frank's eyes. A storage unit. James rubbed the dent in the watch crystal on his wrist, reflex hunting for comfort. It's where you keep things you can't risk at home, he said, or where you keep things you want found. Which one is this? Emily asked. James didn't answer. Michael's phone vibrated. Unknown number. He swiped, put it on speaker. Nothing. Then a hiss, the same texture as radio static, only closer. A man's voice, thin and relaxed, like a late-night DJ. James, you always did love a family gathering. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Michael steadied the phone on the table. Who is this? You the son? The voice said, amused. Always arranging, always counting. Don't count past dawn. The call cut. The line showed no duration, no origin. Blank. Frank's face had the stillness of a pond before you noticed the ripple of a fish. They're in range, he said. Burner phones don't sound that clean unless they're close. Michael found a pen, wrote the words anyway. Don't count past dawn. He circled dawn twice. He underlined storage. He drew 2 small triangles, one inside the other, and realized his hands weren't shaking. He also realized he was angry in a way he hadn't allowed since 1990. He looked at James. If we have until morning, we use the night. Michael, Linda said, a warning and a plea. We don't leave the house, Frank said. Not with the alley hot. He tapped the window frame. But we can still look. How? Emily asked. Listen, Frank said, and walked to the back door. He unlocked it, then locked it again, counting quietly. 1, click, 2, click. He did it twice more. Locks are tells. If someone's watching, they count your habits. We change the count. He moved a chair 6 inches, set a spoon on the counter rim, tilted a picture frame by a thumb's width. Markers? If anything shifts, we know which window they used and how far they came. Michael understood instantly. He moved through the house with purpose, 2 pennies on the hallway baseboard, a pencil balanced on the lip of the basement door, a receipt slid half out of a cookbook on the second shelf. He had taught his students how to read primary sources. Now he made the house into one. When he returned, James was holding the whistle. He turned it in his fingers like a compass. You blew this the night I missed your game, he said softly. I heard it from the end of the block. I almost turned around. Michael felt the old ache open and do nothing more dramatic than breathe. Almost doesn't raise a kid. James nodded. No, it doesn't. He set the whistle back in the box with the care of a man returning a relic to a reliquary. The radio cracked again, baseball erased by a smear of sound. Then a whisper, not the DJ voice, younger, excited, as if reporting from a car. 2 in the kitchen, 1 by the door. The old man sees too much. Frank moved without looking like he moved. He slid 2 steps to the side, lifting his profile out of sight lines that might be pointed at the window. They're not on the lawn, he said quietly. They're on the street. Police? Emily whispered. Eventually, Frank said. But if we call now, they'll drift, and we'll be left with the same ghosts and a report number. He looked at James. Storage. Which facility? Which unit? James hesitated, then exhaled like surrender. Kings Mill off Gilbert, Unit 3C. Michael's pen moved. Kings Mill, Gilbert Ave, 3C. He drew the triangles again without meaning to. What's inside? Silence gathered as if the house itself leaned closer. James swallowed. The files, manifests I copied, a ledger, and something that proves who took the first money and who made sure I knew my family could be. He stopped. It has the stamp. Triangle inside a triangle. Emily's eyes shone, not with hope, but with a clear direction. Then we go. No, Frank said. We send our eyes, not our bodies. He pointed to the Emerson. They're listening. We talk about bedtime. We clean up the plates. We make normal sounds. And we wait for them to relax. Michael looked at the motel stub, at the smear of black on the handkerchief, at the bent latch he could see through the glass. He breathed in, slow. I'll move the car to the curb, he said at normal volume. Make room in the driveway. Do it, Frank said, equally normal, then lower. Count the shadows, mirror check. If you see the Riverfront Inn key on a ring, you turn around. Michael nodded. He took the house keys, added the whistle to his pocket without thinking, and stepped into the night that smelled like wet asphalt and old cut grass. The porch light made a shallow pool of gold on the steps. The street beyond was darker than it should have been, one lamp-post out, another buzzing itself toward failure. He rounded the car. On the windshield, under the wiper, lay something small and pale. Not a note. A sliver of cracked crystal, no bigger than his thumbnail, catching the porch light in a shallow wink. He knew that gleam. He had held its twin in a shoebox all afternoon. Michael looked up the street just as a sedan with its lights off slid away from the opposite curb. He couldn't see the driver. He could see the triangle sticker in the back window, faint, nested within a larger triangle. The car turned the corner without braking. He picked up the shard, its edge sandy with wear, and felt the cold bite of memory. He opened his fist and listened to his own breath. Behind him, inside the house, the kitchen lights blinked once, twice, and then the power died. The house exhaled into darkness. For a beat, no one moved. Then Frank's voice, "Flashlights! Drawer!" Michael slid it open by feel and found the emergency kit he'd stocked after the last spring storm, 2 LED flashlights, a headlamp, spare batteries, a roll of fluorescent tape. He tossed a light to Emily, handed the headlamp to Frank, and stuck tape on the edge of the counter like small flags in a dark map. The radio's green dial went black. Without it, the kitchen felt thinner, as if a wall had been quietly wheeled away. James's shadow stood taller than the man. Power grid? Breaker first, Michael said. He swept the beam across the markers he'd planted earlier, pennies on the hallway baseboard, a pencil balanced on the basement door lip, a receipt half slid from a cookbook. The pennies still hugged the baseboard. The receipt hadn't budged, but the pencil, gone. Michael's breath shortened. He tilted the headlamp toward the basement door and found the pencil 2 steps down, broken at its center, as if a heel had come down without noticing. The door's edge showed a scuff in the paint, a pale crescent. No footprints, but a small crescent of grit had fallen where the jamb met the tile, concrete dust, not the usual house dirt. Frank put a finger to his lips. He pressed his shoulder to the door and listened. Basements have their own acoustics, refrigerators in their bones, pipes that talk when no one wants to, the low thrum of a house remembering the weight of its years. Beneath that, a new sound, the tick-tick of cooling metal, like a car's engine after a short run. Frank breathed once and opened the door. The stairwell smelled of damp wood and detergent. Michael moved second, Emily behind him. Linda stood at the top step, arms crossed, the posture of a woman willing a building to keep what it knew. James stayed in the kitchen, eyes on the window, as if it were a stage, and he a reluctant usher. At the bottom, the breaker panel stood untouched. No flipped switches. Michael swept the beam. The workbench held its usual order: jars of screws with masking tape labels, a boxed set of Allen wrenches, a coffee can of drill bits. The dryer sat quiet, its drum a blank moon. The furnace waited like a sleeping dog. Nothing broken, nothing obvious, and yet. Frank crouched by the utility sink and lifted a small rag into the flashlight's path. Black smear. Same as the gate hinge. He sniffed once. Grease, not from a bicycle. He looked up at the ductwork. An oval of metal sat slightly askew, the adhesive tape wrinkled where it had always been smooth. "They used the crawl," Frank said. "Came in under the fence, under the deck, popped the duct boot, dropped into the basement. In and out. Short run. Hence the tick. Small body or practiced." Michael's stomach turned. For what? Frank's light found the workbench again, landed on an old lockbox pushed 6 inches out of square. Michael recognized it. Their dad had kept blank keys in it once for side jobs around the neighborhood. He reached for it and stopped when Frank cleared his throat softly. "Gloves," Frank said. He slipped a pair of thin nitriles from his wallet, habit from a lifetime, and handed another pair to Michael. "If they want you to touch it, don't give them the print." Michael opened the lockbox with the key hanging on a nail. Inside lay a tidy chaos: brass keys with tags, a folded envelope with a decade-old stamp, a spare car fob with a dead battery, and a small velvet watch pouch he didn't recognize. He lifted the pouch. Empty. Emily whispered, "What is it?" Michael turned it inside out. Gold flakes of old lining dusted his palm. The pouch had a faint ring mark in its fabric, shaped like the case back of a watch. He looked at Frank. They were hunting the Timex. "The crystal shard on your windshield," Frank said. "They broke it to get what was inside." "What was inside?" Emily asked. James answered from the stairs. He'd come down quiet as dawn. "A key." Linda stared at him. "Since when?" "Since always," James said. "I put a flat key under the crystal in '90 when I first suspected. If I was grabbed, if they tossed the house, they'd miss the obvious if it was too personal to touch. It opened Unit 3C. Linda's face folded. "You never told me that part." "I mailed the watch back to you," James said. "When I could." Michael gripped the pouch until the velvet creaked. "So whoever broke the crystal tonight now has the key." Frank stood slowly. "Which means 3C won't wait for dawn." They climbed back upstairs, the house darker for having seen more of it. Emily taped the flashlight to a cupboard so it washed the room in a low cone. Michael set the pouch in the shoebox beside the whistle. It looked obscene there, like a mouth without teeth. "The outage," Linda said. "Is it the block or just us?" Michael stepped to the front window and peered through a slit in the curtain. 2 porch lights glowed weakly across the street. The corner lamp buzzed, but held. Not the block. "Selective," Frank said. "Pulled the meter, tripped an exterior disconnect, or killed your main feed from the mast. They know the house." Emily steadied the radio with both hands, as if touch could coax power. "We can't call, we can't see. And they have the key." Michael said, "We still have their habits." And he walked the kitchen, resetting the markers for a second pass. The spoon on the counter rim now angled left. He turned it right. He slid 1 penny a ½ inch. He placed the receipt deeper into the cookbook, every detail a witness sworn. He stopped at the Emerson. With the power dead, its face was a dull eye. He thought of the voice that had used it, of the triangle inside a triangle. He lifted the back panel, traced the cord. A thin, new wire, not factory, ran from the radio's cavity to the wall plate. He held his breath and followed it with the flashlight along the baseboard to an outlet strip. A thumbnail-sized device sat plugged into the end socket. Matte black, no label. A pinhole like a listening ear. Frank leaned in. "Mike? Line-powered, not military, not toy either." He took a photo with his phone, even though he couldn't send it. "They weren't just speaking to you through the radio. They were listening from this." Michael felt heat rise into his face that wasn't from anger so much as shame at every private thing a room keeps for you. He unplugged the strip and dropped the device into a ceramic bowl. James's voice stayed level. They want you rattled, not careful. Rattle breaks people faster than pain. Linda surprised everyone by reaching for the bowl. She put a saucer over it like capping a candle. Then we will be careful. They gathered at the table. Frank flipped his headlamp to a lower setting and spoke like he was calling a play. We have 4 objectives. 1. Deter entry. 2. Preserve what evidence we can. 3. Confirm 3C's status. 4. Leave a blank stage for our watchers to act on and overplay. Emily nodded. How do we confirm 3C without going there? Eyes, Frank said. I keep a trail cam in my garage. Battery, infrared, wide angle. We'll set it facing the street now for whoever returns, and if the alley goes quiet for 15, we can move to the lot behind King's Mill and put the camera on their fence. Not inside, outside. We capture who arrives rather than becoming the ones arrived on. Michael exhaled. We'll still need the unit number visible. Frank's mouth twitched. I know the layout. Row C faces east. 3rd roll-up from the end. Linda looked up slowly. How do you know that? Frank didn't blink. I've had cases there. A beat. And I've rented there. James's head turned. When? Frank held James's stare for the length of one breath. 91. The word sat between them like a dropped wrench. Emily looked from one man to the other. You two are going to stop editing the past. Frank nodded once, conceding. He used my name. He tipped his chin at James. On the lease. Linda closed her eyes. Michael felt the room tilt. You knew? Frank's jaw tightened. I found out after. He thought using a cop's name made it safer. He glanced at James. You were wrong. James didn't argue. I was desperate. Michael wrote it down in his head the only way he knew to live with things. 3C, leased under Frank's name. He circled it. He drew the triangles around it until the paper in his mind had holes. A distant siren swelled and passed. Not for them. Frank rose. Camera. He looked to Emily. I'll need your hands. Emily squared her shoulders. Let's go. Car stays, Frank said. We walked to my garage. Less glass to photograph, less noise. He turned to Michael. Reset your markers. If anything moves, you text me, Maple, even if I have no signal. It'll show as pending. If they take the bait and step inside again, you blow the whistle. Michael nodded. The whistle's weight in his pocket felt like a mixed inheritance. Frank and Emily slipped out the front, hugging hedges, headlamp dark. Michael watched their shapes disappear into the slit of night between houses. He turned back to the table and found Linda's hands clenched on the saucer, knuckles white. You should have told me. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. About the watch, about the lease. Linda's voice was a thread. Mothers make bargains with the dark and call them plans. James's head lowered. I asked her not to tell you. I thought I was pulling the danger away. I dragged it. Michael placed the saucer and bowl in the sink, turned the tap out of habit, remembered the power, left it. We're not arguing the past. We're auditing it. He set a chair leg a hair's width off the tile seam, moved the spoon, reset the pennies. He listened. The house listened back. Footfalls outside, low voices. The porch step creaked once, twice, then settled into patience. Someone tested the front knob, a gentle, almost kind test, like knocking on a sick-room door. Michael's phone, dead to signal, lit briefly with a notification it would never send. Maple. He froze. Emily had pressed send from elsewhere. Then from the driveway, tires whispered. A vehicle rolled to a stop, engine idling, 2 door clicks. The sound of a trunk lifting and closing. Boots on gravel. A third voice, closer, make it quick. Michael took the whistle from his pocket and set it on the table. He didn't put it to his lips. He wanted the sound, but he wanted the choice more. Frank's silhouette appeared in the kitchen doorway like a darker piece of night. Emily right behind, carrying the trail cam pressed to her chest. 3 outside, Frank whispered. 1 keeps eyes on the street, 2 came around back. He opened his palm, 2 screws, still warm. From your meter box. Michael swallowed. We put the cam on the porch? We put it on the maple, Frank said. High. They won't look up. Emily moved like a ladder she trusted. She clipped the cam to a branch, aimed it at the gate. Frank checked the angle with a practiced squint. Back inside, Emily closed the door without sound. Frank set a small handheld scanner on the table, battery model, old, but loyal. He turned the dial. Static. Then a voice, bored, dispatch calm. Alarm, Kings Mill Storage, Unit 3, Charles. Every head lifted. Say again? Another voice asked over the scanner. Kings Mill Storage, the dispatcher repeated. Silent trip, Unit 3C. Frank's eyes met Michael's. The house, as if to underline the message, stayed very, very dark. They moved quickly, not noisily. Frank laid out the plan in 3 sentences you could memorize under stress. We split into 2 pairs, he said. Michael with me, Linda with Emily. Emily, you drive Linda to the old church lot behind King's Mill. Park under the dead sodium light. Don't leave the car. If anything shifts here, Michael texts Maple twice. If anything shifts there, you text River twice. Why not all together? Linda asked. Because together is easy to follow, Frank said. And if we're unlucky, the only thing we're buying each other tonight is time. Michael clipped a small utility knife to his belt, slid the whistle into his chest pocket, where he could feel its weight. James stood by the table, as if measuring whether to volunteer and already knowing the answer they'd give him. Stay, Frank told him. If they want you to move, don't give it to them. They planned this night around you. James's reply was quiet. I know. They left by different doors. Emily's sedan rolled away first. Lights off until the end of the block, then 1 click to parking lights, like a promise to the dark. Michael and Frank took the alley, their steps on wet grit, the only sound the night admitted. At the corner, Frank paused. Heads up, he murmured. The triangle car. Parked 2 houses down sat the sedan Michael had seen earlier, now with windows fogged faintly from breath or weather. The triangle sticker, small, nested, glowed only when you knew where to look. Eyes on us, Michael said. Probably, Frank said. Let them be satisfied. He tilted his head toward the opposite direction. We loop. They cut through backyards, slipped past a trampoline with rain, pooled in its slack mat, and emerged 2 blocks later near Gilbert Avenue. King's Mill Storage sat low and long beyond a chain-link fence topped with tired barbed wire. The office lights were off. A single security lamp buzzed over the keypad. The lot behind the facility, the old church lot, held 3 cars, a pickup with a ladder rack, a compact with a mismatched door, and under the dead sodium light, Emily's sedan. Michael felt a knot in his chest loosen, just enough to breathe. He and Frank crouched by the fence. Frank angled the trail cam through the diamonds of chain link, pointed at the east-facing row, C row, and tapped the arm of his headlamp once, twice, 3 times, the signal they'd used in the yard to calibrate. The camera blinked its tiny red eye and then went invisible again. Now we watch, Frank said. He spoke like someone settling in for a long play with a final act that could go either way. Minutes slid the way minutes slide when you're asking them to carry weight. Rain ticked on the metal roofs of the storage rows. Somewhere, a highway sang at a distance. Michael counted breaths to keep his hands from shaking. 4 in, hold, 4 out. An old debate team trick repurposed for the present. Headlights swung once across the fence and were gone. Another set approached slow, then stopped without pulling in. The sedan idled. Michael couldn't see the driver. He could see the faint glow of a phone screen arcing up to a face and down again. The car reversed, vanished behind the offices, then reappeared at the far end of the row. The keypad chirped. The gate rolled back. "Which code?" Michael whispered. "Doesn't matter," Frank said. They had one. The sedan slid to a stop at row C. Two figures got out, hoods up, confident without being sloppy. One went to the third roll-up from the end. The other stood sentry, hands in pockets, head on a swivel that didn't hurry. The first figure crouched at the lock, didn't cut it, didn't pick it, produced a key and turned. The lock sprang easily. The figure rolled the door up halfway and ducked under. Michael's jaw clenched. "They have the Timex key." Frank's hand landed on his forearm, a pressure that meant hold. He pointed with his chin. "Watch the sentry." The sentry had a tell. Every 30 seconds his left foot scraped a quiet half circle, a man counting without numbers. He didn't look at the camera. He didn't look at anything too long, a pro. The first figure reemerged with a banker's box hugged tight to the chest. They didn't rush. They locked the unit. They walked the box to the trunk. "License?" Michael asked. "Plates taped," Frank said. "Temporary. They're not first-timers." The trunk closed. The door of the sedan opened, and for a second the dome light flared. Michael saw a wedge of a triangle sticker on the inside of the glove box, as if the symbol needed company. The sedan backed out. As it reached the gate, a security cart turned the corner of the office and started toward row C. The cart's driver lifted a hand to shield his eyes from the sedan's headlights. The sedan paused for exactly one beat, the length of a decision, and then slid out the gate before it could be blocked. The cart continued its slow patrol, unhurried by alarms that had not sounded. "Silent trip," Frank said. "Someone cleared the call." Michael swallowed hard. "They took the box." "We still have the eyes," Frank said, "and we still have what they didn't take." "Which is what?" "Whatever made them leave fast," Frank said. "Pros finish a room. They didn't." He signaled to Emily's car with a small cone of the headlamp, low and quick. Emily's phone flashed once from inside. She'd seen them. He texted anyway. "River." The message spun without sending. It didn't matter. The choreography held. They skirted the fence line to the far corner, where the chain link met a maintenance post. The tie wire had been clipped months ago and twisted back by a lazy hand. Frank pried it with 2 fingers, opened a child-sized gap. "In and out," he said. "No heroics." Inside the compound, everything smelled like damp concrete and dust. Their shoes whispered. Row C's third door from the end wore a fresh scrape where a key had kissed the lock under pressure. Frank touched it with the back of his knuckle. "Still warm," he said. Michael's pulse urged him forward. The padlock clicked open under the key James had described, one Frank produced from his pocket. Michael stared. "You had a copy?" Frank didn't look away from the door. "I made one in 91 when I found out about the lease, insurance." Michael could have been angry. He wasn't. He filed it in the right folder in his head and lifted the door with Frank. The unit's light didn't come on. The bulb hung dead. They raised their flashlights. Inside, a small geography of a life hidden on purpose. 3 banker's boxes, a milk crate of VHS tapes with handwritten labels. DocCam 08 to 12, Manifest AF, Yearbook 89, Home Copy, Turner. A plastic tote labeled Tools with a bolt cutter, a pry bar, and a camcorder that looked like it could still whir if asked nicely. A shoebox. Michael's eye went to that instinctively, the way a person's hand goes to a scar. He opened the shoebox. Inside lay the Timex watch band, cut. An empty crystal ring. No movement, no back, no key. Just the carcass of a thing that had once told time for a boy who grew up without it. He set the band down with care he didn't feel. Frank lifted a ledger from the top banker's box and angled it to the light. Columns of numbers marched down the page, dates in the left margin, initials in the right, FM, RC, TT, QCS. Frank's finger stopped at FM. Michael felt his throat close. "Frank?" "Freight manifest," Frank said, before Michael could say what hurt. He touched QCS. Queen City Storage. Not a person. A place that stamped things. Michael let out a breath that left him lightheaded. He scanned pages at speed, not reading stories yet, only shapes. This many trucks, that many pallets, a note in the margin, 24 pallets listed, 22 received, and a triangle sketched there, small, casual, like a man doodled in a meeting where he wasn't meant to speak. He slid a tape from the crate, dock cam, row 112, and lifted the camcorder's viewfinder. A battery lived in it, bloated, old. He pressed power. The light, against all odds, blinked red, the tape whirred, static. Then an image stuttered, black and white, the field of a loading dock with a long-nosed truck backing in. The timestamp jittered in the corner. A man stepped into frame wearing a city badge on a chain and waving the truck forward with board authority. He looked toward the camera once, annoyed by nothing, and walked out of frame. Frank's voice was low. "Freeze it." Michael paused the tape. In the stretch of pixels where faces try to live, the man with the badge had eyes that Michael knew as well as his own backyard. Not because he'd met him, but because the man had appeared in the background of a photo from Michael's 5th grade field day. Not in uniform, in sunglasses, standing near the fence, where parents stand when they don't want to be counted. Michael's skin turned to glass. He was around us. Frank said nothing for a long second. Then, "We need a clean copy." He popped the tape, slid it into a new case from the tote, labeled it A, copy, and put the original back. Footsteps hissed in the gravel outside. Both men killed their lights at the same time, muscle memory of people who'd learned to make themselves into walls. A shadow moved across the corrugated metal of the neighboring unit. Voices. 2. A laugh, quick and professional, like a man complimenting his own plan. A key in the lock of a unit down the row. A roll-up door rattled, something heavy set down. The door rattled again, closed. Frank leaned in close enough that Michael could count the breaths. "We leave now." Michael's hand fell on the last banker's box, the one they hadn't opened, a label scrawled in haste, "Turner House." He didn't open it, not all the way. He lifted the lid an inch and saw photographs, a backyard with a maple tree, snapshots shot from a car window, a boy with a whistle at his mouth frozen mid-blow. The angle said long lens. The date stamp said 1990, 1991, 2015. His stomach dropped. They never stopped. Frank replaced the lid. "Now," he said. And they lowered the door with slow hands and quiet hearts. They retraced steps to the fence. Frank fed the copy tape into his jacket. Michael slid the ledger inside his shirt. At the fence gap, a flashlight burned into their faces. "Evening," a voice said, bland as the inside of an office. The security cart idled, the driver wearing a jacket with a stitched name over the pocket. The flashlight dropped a fraction. The man's eyes clicked from Frank to Michael and back again, recognition rising like a tide coming in. "Mr. Malone," he said, polite. "Hadn't seen you since we updated the lease." Michael's mouth went dry. Frank didn't blink. "Good to know you keep records." "Good to know you keep late hours," the man said. He smiled without showing teeth. "Rough night for power." He angled the light toward Michael's chest. "You carry anything that belongs to us?" Michael didn't move. In the pocket over his heart, the whistle pressed a small, perfect circle into his skin. He felt the heat of it, as if breath had already filled it. From the church lot, a car door slammed. Emily's, too loud, too soon. The security man's head turned a millimeter. That was all. Frank moved first. The flashlight beam caught the guard's face in a harsh slice. His badge said Martin, though the stitching looked newer than the jacket. Frank held still, the way men do when stillness buys time. Michael's heartbeat thudded so hard he swore the whistle in his pocket might vibrate from it. "Mr. Malone," Martin said again, calm as though this were a scheduled meeting. "Never thought I'd see you back at King's Mill after all these years." Frank's chin didn't dip, didn't rise. "Still making rounds, I see." Martin smiled with only one side of his mouth. Funny thing about rounds, they bring you right back where you started, like tonight. Michael's throat dried. We were just... Careful, Frank cut in, voice flat. His eyes never left the guard. Say too much, and you've already said it twice. Martin's flashlight swept lower. It landed on Michael's chest, where the whistle pressed against his shirt. The guard's eyes narrowed, not in recognition, but in curiosity. Old toy? He asked. Or something you plan to use? Michael didn't answer. He could feel the whistle burning into his ribs. The silence cracked when a radio on Martin's belt hissed, "Unit secure, box delivered, advised disposal." Michael caught the words as if they'd been written across the air itself. Box delivered, disposal. Martin didn't reach for the radio. He didn't need to. He let the words linger. Then he leaned closer, lowering the flashlight until his face was lit from below, campfire style. You should have stayed gone, Frank. You all should have. Behind them, Emily's car door slammed again, deliberate this time, a distraction. Michael turned his head half an inch, enough to catch her silhouette near the sedan, one arm raised in a false wave, like neighbors acknowledging each other in the dark. Linda sat stiff in the passenger seat, hands visible on the dash. Martin looked past them, then back at Frank. Your family keeps showing up in places they don't belong. 25 years later, they still don't get the message. Frank's jaw flexed. Messages aren't worth much when the sender's a coward. For the first time, Martin's smile reached his eyes. Coward? No, I'm the errand boy, but you'll see the postmark soon enough. Frank moved first, again, but this time it wasn't violence. He reached into his jacket, pulled the VHS tape copy they'd taken, and held it chest high. Then you'll want this. Martin's smile faltered. His hand twitched. Michael saw it. Greed disguised as protocol. The guard wanted the tape. You know what this shows, Frank pressed. The doc, the badge. If it leaks, your friends burn. Martin's voice sharpened. Hand it over. Frank tilted his head. One condition, we walk away. Michael wanted to scream. Bargaining with evidence meant risking it all. But Frank's tone wasn't negotiation. It was bait. Martin stepped forward, flashlight angled down now, greedy hand reaching. His shadow stretched over Frank and onto Michael, who saw the outline of the triangle sticker glowing faintly from the guard's clipboard. 2 triangles, nested, the emblem they'd been circling all night. QCS, Queen City Storage, not just a place, but an organization, an arm that stretched wider than any warehouse. As Martin's hand closed over the tape, Frank whispered, Now. Michael didn't think. He blew the whistle. The shriek shattered the night, sharp and endless, piercing through the compound like a flare made of sound. Martin recoiled, hand flying to his ear. From the sedan, doors burst open. Emily gunned the engine, headlights blinding. Linda leaned on the horn, one long scream of steel. Frank shoved Martin's chest, hard, sending the tape clattering to the ground. Michael scooped it before it touched dirt twice. They dove through the fence gap, hearts tearing against ribs, and ran for the church lot. Behind them, Martin shouted into his radio, Engage! Don't let them clear the perimeter! Michael didn't look back. He couldn't. The whistle's echo still lived in his skull, and with it came a single truth. The past wasn't just resurfacing. It had been waiting, patient, organized, branded with triangles and silence. They piled into Emily's sedan. Tires spun on gravel, caught, launched them into the street. Frank barked directions. Left, cut through Vine. They'll expect Gilbert. Emily's hands shook on the wheel, but her turns were perfect, clean, practiced from years of city driving. Linda clutched the dash, whispering something that wasn't prayer, but had the rhythm of one. Michael held the tape against his chest like a second heart. The ledger pressed damp against his ribs. Objects had become lives, paper and plastic heavier than flesh. Headlights flared in the rear view, the triangle sedan, closing. Faster, Frank urged. I know, Emily snapped, foot slamming. The sedan leapt forward. Rain slicked the asphalt, every corner a coin toss. Michael's eyes darted, street signs blurred, storefronts shuttered, the city both familiar and hostile. "Where?" Emily demanded. "My house," Frank said. "Garage. Trust me." Michael almost laughed. The man who'd hidden Unit 3C under his own name was asking for trust. But there was no time for arguments. They screeched into Frank's block. The garage door yawned open by remote, its motor groaning. Emily shot the car inside. Frank slapped the button. The door closed, cutting the triangle sedan out of sight, out of sound. For now. Breaths came ragged. Michael slid down the seat, tape still clutched. What now? Frank leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Now we stop pretending this is only about James." Everyone froze. The name hung like smoke. Michael looked at his father. James's face was pale, older than the 25 years he'd carried. He opened his mouth, shut it, opened again. "It wasn't just me they wanted gone, it was what I found, and who I found it with." Linda's voice cracked. "Say it!" James's eyes lifted, wet and fierce. "Frank, it was Frank." Silence detonated. Emily's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Michael's pulse roared in his ears. Frank didn't flinch, didn't deny. He just breathed, slow, measured. "I was supposed to burn it all in 91, Frank said. The ledgers, the manifests. Instead, I copied them. Insurance. I told myself it was leverage, but it was cowardice. And when James stumbled too close, they told me to handle it." Michael's chest split with heat. "Handle it? How?" Frank met his eyes, unblinking. "I was supposed to disappear him." The words cleaved the air. James shook his head, bitter laugh breaking. "And you almost did, except you couldn't. So you made me run instead." Michael's vision swam. "You both lied. 25 years of silence, and you both lied." Linda pressed her palms to her face. Emily whispered, "God." The garage felt smaller, airless. The whistle in Michael's pocket might as well have been a blade. He pulled it out, staring at the teeth marks he'd left as a boy. The sound that had just saved them was the same sound that had once been ignored. Everything looped. Frank's voice cut through. "But I didn't finish it. That's why you're here now. That's why we still have a chance." Michael's voice cracked. "A chance at what?" Frank looked at the tape, the ledger. "At exposing them. At ending it." Outside, an engine idled. Close. The triangle sedan hadn't left. It was waiting. Michael's hand closed around the whistle again. He understood now. It wasn't a toy. It was a signal. And the next blow might decide whether truth lived or burned. The engine outside idled like a held breath. Inside Frank's garage, the four of them sat in a square of air that felt narrower than the car. Michael kept the VHS tape tight against his chest. The ledger warmed under his shirt as if paper could take a side. Frank broke the silence first. "I didn't disappear him." He looked at James. "I made a different sin. I let you run, and I didn't call you back." James's mouth twisted. "Because you were bought?" Frank's eyes closed once, a deliberate blink that carried 25 years. "Because I was scared I'd be asked to prove I wasn't." Linda shifted in the passenger seat. The overhead light threw a soft ring on her forehead, a tired halo that belonged to no one's faith in particular. "So it was both of you," she said flatly. "Two men who told yourselves a story about protection and called it sacrifice." "You mailed the watch," Michael said to her, not with accusation but with ache. "You kept an address we didn't know existed." Linda exhaled. "I kept our son breathing long enough to become the man he is." The words weren't pride. They were inventory. "If the world had to hate me to keep you alive, I took the receipt." Emily's phone buzzed with a phantom notification that never sent. She flicked it dark again. "We can sit here and audit everyone's sins until dawn, or we can move." They said disposal. She looked at Frank. "Where?" "Not a landfill," Frank said. "Not when the point is to erase a thread and scare the hands that touched it. He tapped the tape. "They'll burn. Somewhere fast, somewhere no one asks where the smoke came from." "Riverfront," James said. "Warehouse district still has burn barrels for pallets. Or the scrapyard. Or the rail underpass by McMillan. Guys torch copper there." Michael's mind drew a quick map. Rivers, lots, shadows, just like he'd taught his students to map supply lines in the Civil War. He tasted the bitter joke of it. "Then we don't let them burn it. We make it too public." "How?" Linda asked. "People," Michael said. "Neighbors, street light, sound." He lifted the whistle. "They hate witnesses. We force them to choose." Frank shook his head. "Public can turn into crossfire. We need a wedge." He snapped his fingers once, a sound like a switch clicking. "Internal affairs," James scoffed. "We tried that." Frank held up a hand. "Not the office." "A person. Ruiz. She was a patrol rookie in '90, filed complaints that went nowhere, left the city for 3 years, came back with a law degree and a reputation for tanking careers. She has a number that isn't the number on her card." Michael's chest thudded. "You have it?" "I did," Frank said. "It's in my desk." "Power's out at your house, too?" Emily asked. Frank listened to the street like you listen to a clock you can't see. "No, they cut the Turners. Mine's clean." He looked at Michael. "You and I go inside. Linda, Emily, stay with the car. If we don't come out in 3 minutes, you drive to District 1 and walk in loud." James cleared his throat. "And me?" Frank didn't soften. "You sit in the back seat and look like regret until someone arrests you or thanks you. Either way, you breathe." It wasn't kind, but it was the only role that kept James both present and off the board. He accepted it with a small nod that looked like surrender and dignity at once. They moved. The garage door yawned open and brought the night back in. The triangle sedan idled at the curb, lights off, 2 silhouettes inside. When the door finished its track, the sedan's brake lights winked, a lazy blink, then went dark again. Message received. "Walk," Frank murmured, and they did, straight up the short drive, into the lit kitchen that smelled like coffee that had been made and forgotten. Frank's house was neat, old cop neat. Keys in a bowl, mail squared, a line of clean mugs too evenly spaced to be casual. He went to the desk, slid open the top drawer, and pulled a worn address book. His finger found a page by muscle memory. He held up a small card that looked more library than law. "Ruiz, IA, cell, don't text." Michael dialed. For a breath, nothing. Then a click, a voice dry as copy paper. "Ruiz, don't hang up," Frank said. "It's Malone. You told me to call if the triangles popped their heads up." A pause. "You finally interested in finishing what you started?" "Yes," Frank said. "And I'm not alone." He nodded at Michael, put the phone on speaker. "Who's your choir?" Ruiz asked. Michael stepped closer. "Michael Turner. You worked a missing person case in '90 as a rookie. My father was the ghost." Another pause that sounded like Ruiz was reaching back into a drawer no one got to see. "I remember your mother's front room smelled like lemon pledge and a candle she kept relighting. I also remember the detective on the case telling me to mind my lane." "That detective," Frank said carefully, "was me." "Then I hope you've learned to cross lanes," Ruiz said. "What do you have?" "A ledger," Frank said, "a tape, and a guard who knows my name." "Where are you?" "Vine, my place." "Stay," Ruiz said. "If you move, you make me choose between helping you and chasing you. I'm not chasing you. I'll be there in 12. "Make it 8, Frank said. "We have company." "Then make them wait," Ruiz snapped, and cut the line. Ruiz arrives, the Tyrrell boy is caught, neighbors start showing up, tensions rise. Michael holds the whistle, ready to give the signal that will change everything. The cruiser's door swung open and became shields. Ruiz stepped in front of Michael with a movement that was both practiced and personal. Her palm went up. "Don't," she said to the sedan, and the word contained an entire career of men who had and men who hadn't. The sedan stopped so close the heat from the engine brushed Michael's knees. The driver's window slid down an inch, The DJ voice floated out. "Detective, you don't want to make a career error over a family drama." Ruiz smiled without softness. "My career's been one long error, according to people like you." She pointed at the windshield with a pen like a wand. "Hands where I can see them, driver and passenger." Slowly, 2 pairs of hands rose. A triangle sticker gleamed on the dash. The SUV's doors cracked, closing again when the cruiser eased its nose 6 inches forward, a canine growl without teeth. Neighbors now lined the porches, robes, sweatshirts, one man in a Bengals t-shirt rubbing sleep from his eyes with a knuckle. Phones recorded, because that is what phones do when nights turn into stories. Michael's chest loosened a fraction. Witnesses, finally. A public that might decide the narrative. Ruiz leaned back just enough to brush Michael's elbow with her sleeve. "Hand me the tape." He passed it. She lifted it shoulder high, turned to the cluster of watching neighbors, and announced, "This is evidence related to public corruption and a 25-year disappearance. If anything happens to the next 30 feet between this garage and that cruiser, you have the right and the duty to remember." She smiled at the phones, at the faces, at the human need to be useful. "Roll." They follow in procession to the police car. Ruiz takes the material to the jail. James gives a statement. Frank admits his guilt and cooperates. In the Inquirer, the tape is played, confirmed. Names begin to circulate. The public now knows. At the interview room, Ruiz placed the whistle in the center of the table. Michael told everything, the fair photo, the years of silence, the truth revealed, words cut like surgery, removing an old tumor of lies. By dawn, the city knew. By dawn, the Turner family wasn't a rumor, but a case. Michael slipped the whistle back into his pocket, not as a toy, but as proof that sound can break silence. Morning broke without permission. The Ohio River caught the first light and spread it like a rumor across Cincinnati's skyline. Downtown stirred, buses hissed, vendors stacked crates on wet sidewalks. To most of the city, it was just another Wednesday. To the Turners, it was the first day without a countdown. Michael stood outside District 1, hands in his pockets, the whistle pressed against his thigh. He had given his statement, signed pages that would live in boxes, placed evidence into hands that would either protect it or betray it. His breath fogged in the cold air, but he wasn't shivering. For the first time in 25 years, he felt still. Emily walked out beside him, jacket zipped to her chin. "You okay?" He nodded, though okay wasn't the word. He was changed, cracked open. "I just don't know what to do next." Her arm brushed his. "Then start with today. That's enough." Behind them, Linda stepped into the morning, shoulders hunched, eyes swollen from tears that had not asked permission. She looked smaller, but not weaker. Michael slipped an arm around her, and she leaned just enough to be a mother again instead of a survivor. She whispered, "Your father's alive. That's all I ever prayed for." James followed last. He looked older in the daylight, his beard showing silver, his body carrying the fatigue of a man who had lived underground in plain sight. He had confessed, recorded, handed over the names and nights and freight. He hadn't been forgiven, not by Frank, not by Linda, not by Michael, but he had been heard. Sometimes that's the only beginning possible. Frank waited by his truck across the lot, a man suspended between guilt and utility. He met Michael's eyes and raised a hand that wasn't apology, wasn't farewell, but acknowledgement. They would meet again, maybe in a courtroom, maybe at a grave. But the silence between them was gone. That was something. Reporters were already gathering, microphones like spears. Ruiz intercepted them with a precision born of battles no one had written about yet. "Evidence is secured," she told them. "Statements are being processed. This is an ongoing investigation." Her tone was clipped, controlled. But her eyes found Michael and softened a fraction. He had done his part. She would do hers. The Turners walked past the cameras, Neighbors would read headlines over coffee, co-workers would whisper at desks, strangers would scroll past their faces. The story belonged to the city now, not just to them. Michael paused at the curb, watching a school bus rumble by. A boy pressed his forehead to the glass, plastic whistle dangling from his neck on a shoelace. The sight pierced him. He wanted to run, to tell the boy never to believe that silence means safety, never to think that nobody listens. But the bus turned the corner, and the boy was gone. He reached into his pocket, held up his own whistle, teeth marks etched deep from years of waiting. Emily squeezed his arm. Linda wiped her eyes. James stared at the sky like a man who finally dared. Michael thought of the first night, the fair, the balloon, the empty yard. He thought of the years lost, the birthdays marked without candles, the dinners with an empty chair, and he thought of the backyard barbecue, the impossible reappearance of a father who was both lost and found. The story was no longer about a man who disappeared in 1990. It was about what survived in the people left behind, about how a family learns to live with echoes, and what happens when those echoes finally answer back. As the sun cleared the horizon, Michael slipped the whistle back into his pocket. He didn't need to blow it anymore. The city had heard. He whispered to himself and to the morning, "We're not counting anymore.